Okay, this is March 19th, and this is Big Picture Dialogue Group. We've already been dialoguing around the topic of the City of Lights.
Yeah, and I just wanted to welcome everyone today. Before we start, I felt really led, as this is the Big Picture Mentoring Group. I was told this morning that it was so important that as we started, I was to honor you all and honor that you'd got this. Well, honor you for everything, really. But to point out that we spend a lot of time honoring heaven, and heaven wanted to say that you are an equal part of that. And therefore, it's not the emphasis that we honor heaven and we don't honor each other. And we ended up having a very significant encounter a few days ago. And we had to spend an awful lot of time honoring each other and going through our names. And I see there's a huge revelation now coming out that heaven wants to understand that you are to be honored in a magnificent way. You can be worshipped by angels as you enter heaven. You're the one that's honored just as much as anyone else. So to just receive that revelation, absorb it, don't fight it, enjoy it. And so I just say to all of you, I honor you immensely, absolutely immensely, from the depths of my heart, for what you've, for the journey you've been on. I know how hard the journey can be and what it means, but also for people who are willing to have the final blueprint as their scroll is a magnificent achievement. So let's just join together as we begin the dialogue. Let's just join together, so it's not an academic dialogue. We join together with all of heaven. We invite all of heaven to inspire us, to encourage us, to lead us into a most significant dialogue that's will contribute to all our growth. And we just ask for a huge download today of clarity about how to accelerate each other and where we need to be accelerated. And so we just draw on the river and the tree of life for our source, and we anticipate a wonderful dialogue. And just very quickly, I wasn't going to share anything today, but it was very weird last night. Just this morning actually, I had this. I hardly ever get dreams, so when I get them and I can remember them, I take them very significantly. And literally, this was a 1-minute dream just before I woke up this morning. It was so out of the blue. And I asked what it was about, and I got revelation that it was very much linked with the big picture. And it was, we'd found this amazing old house that needed renovating, but it was it was a stunning house. You know what I mean? It hardly needed renovating because you could see the magnificence of it. It was just very slightly down. And it was on top of a hill, and it had the most amazing views. I mean, 360, it was breathtaking. And we were going up to look at this house to buy it. And for some reason, I ended up getting on this like a maglev train to get up there because it was really high up. And this train went at the most warp speed to get up this hill. Absolutely. It was really quite scary. It was so fast. When I got to the top, I was absolutely like, oof. knocked about a bit by the journey. It was just warp speed, and that was it. And what I saw was that this was to prepare us for an intense acceleration, and to and I was thinking, well, the house, I didn't see it as New Earth, because we weren't creating a new thing. It was going to restore something beautiful that had been lost. And I think it was a lot of the other aspects other than New Earth, like immortality, something that had already been existing but had actually got a bit run down in its understanding. And also probably a whole understanding of what the new wineskin is, and the true living and everlasting. Things that we have to that are magnificent, but we have to slightly rebuild and reframe to the world and call for. So yeah, very very interesting. But and also a couple of days ago, Father said to me really clearly, be prepared for things not to look like how you expect them to look like. I can feel inside me certain things saying, no, I want it to be this, I want it to be that, I don't want it to be this, this and this. So I think maybe a challenge to all of us, that it may end up looking, and we may end up doing things that are a bit different from what we thought it was about. And that seems to have been the journey all the way along as well. And it seems to be just the continual submission of what does the final blueprint look like compared to what we thought it was. And also the acceleration, that's what seemed to be significant with the dream, was that willingness to be accelerated even if we didn't want that. Like, I didn't want to go up that hill that quickly. I was not comfortable. And it was, but maybe that's what the journey is now. There could be some immense acceleration in things that are happening, and it's an adjustment of mindset to go with the flow.
Take the brakes off, right?
Yes, yes. Oh, all I could say was that it was stunning up the top. It was just, it was my dream house. Lovely. So I want to hand it over to you guys today. Thank you for those testimonies. That was really encouraging. Hand it over to what's the Father showing you, or any questions, where any struggles, anything that you really, really want to dialogue about. Lee, though, before that what you just shared was magnificent. I wonder if we should get that on the recording. Just very briefly, could you just share again, or are you happy to share that about the glowing blueprint?
Yes, I've just got a lot of background noise that I can't do much about, so please, sorry for that. Well, when I was framing up for this morning, I just want to add to that. I found that I had to lay down every thought that I've had of what the final blueprint is. And so that's what I started doing, just saying whatever I know, whatever I think I know, even whatever, I would hope to know, I'm just laying it all down. So I can confirm about the submission of laying down daily to make way for the fullest blueprint. Because maybe even sometimes what we think is cluttering up, and if we can unclutter some of our thoughts and our past imaginations of where we think is the end result. It just really makes room for the end result. So getting back to what I just shared before, I just had a very quick picture that we were in the City of Lights, and all of our blueprints were shining that were in us. Because I'd also framed up and asked that my Fuller's blueprint be in line with the final blueprint, and released the living letters of my final scroll to entangle with the finest blueprint. And so we were there in the City of Lights, and because of the light, it was just, everything was fully shining. All the mysteries were no longer mysteries. We could clearly see, and we clearly had full knowledge and understanding as we gazed upon each other and gazed upon each other's blueprints while we were there in the City of Lights.
Just so significant, that, and it's almost like what we did last week when we went through each other's names and understood each other's names. It gave us an understanding of the elements of the big picture and the different angles that people come at it from to build. Oh, I just think that's magnificent. I always see that's really worthy of, when we're describing what New Earth is all about, the kind of body we have, that's we include that in the description. Really good. Thank you. Anyone else? Oh no, sorry. No, I was going to, before we share any questions, I just wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable judging in their own courtroom below eternity. If not, we can have a little dialogue about that.
Can I share a testimony real quick, Jane, before we start the questions?
Oh yeah, okay.
I just wanted to share. Well, I guess it's more of a finding, I think, that I think may be connected to my name, and but anyhow, just quickly, I ended up watching a video about embryo transplants and how this couple decided to adopt some embryos that have been in the embryo bank for 15 years. And the story kind of hit me in an intriguing way. And what came to me was that how there are spirits, if you will, I mean, like us, that haven't been fully brought into the world yet. There's some in embryo state, in the embryo banks, frozen. And so that took my attention again to the overlap of affinity that we've been looking at for these last couple of weeks. And, my heart just went out to those that are waiting for their bodies, whether they're in the embryo state or whether they're in Eden, waiting to get their bodies. And then I think that how I saw that connect to my name, love, everlasting love, was how love will leave the 99 to go after the one, to get all. And that's how the love of God is. And two, what stood out to me before, and I shared it with, actually me and Bill had talked about it, just how it stood out to me how Billy Graham, how he didn't live to 100, but he died at the age of 99, which we thought spoke of how, which could speak of how it was God putting an exclamation mark about leaving the 99 and going after that one, which to me at that time, it came to me to represent these that are waiting for their bodies and waiting for us to we're waiting for us to do what God was calling us to do, to connect these two realms so that they could step into the fullness of the big picture that we're calling now. So anyway, I just wanted to, it was just an interesting perspective that I felt like God was showing me, and it kind of put on my heart a compassion for these people that are waiting for their bodies, and so that they can have full expression and express and outwork what's on their scroll, so that they can be a part of the big scroll that's that's rolling out. So that was real. That really surprised me. It kind of came to me from. It was kind of side blinding in a good way, and I was like, wow. I mean, it kind of hit me in a deep place. I was like, wow, and it just kind of made all creation is waiting for us more personal. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so much. Yeah, so that's just that. Yes.
I'm really glad you shared that, Simone, because I'm not sure if I've shared it somewhere, but I have felt this really strongly in the last week, maybe a bit longer, 2 weeks, that we are really at the phase where the sons have to learn how to release bodies back, and I was calling forth the hunger of that it wouldn't be freaky and weird, but there would be a real hunger, and they would see the need for. That's how we get the massive acceleration, and that's how we all unite as one united body. So it completely changes any understanding of evangelism and the small picture that we used to have. And I'm really excited you've shared that, because it almost feels like Father's just giving you the heart for that. I love this group as well, to dialogue about that topic when you're ready and when you've got that understanding and that hunger to learn that, because I see that it's the significant part of us completing the stages in Revelation, in the book of Revelation, to allow the end picture for all the ecclesia to come into place, the new earth and the new heaven. But it won't come into place until the sons have the heart, the hunger, and have done their part in those sorts of acts, governmental acts.
Jane,
Yeah.
can I just add, just before this subject may get changed, I've been wondering also about when is it a body, from the perspective of not the ones who are being released to get their body for the first time, but when, like, what stage is it a body? Because I'm thinking of miscarriages. Do you know where I'm going? So wondering, just by becoming an embryo, was that enough for them to get a body here, even if they didn't get to fully outlive their scroll? Like, where do they go? Do they go back and then try again? Or was that enough to complete whatever they needed to complete? And then, do I dare say abortions as well, if you know? So I see that's
well, there's several types of bodies we're talking about releasing. So there's the thing I was thinking about mainly here was releasing the immortal resurrected body from Eden, for those that had lived and died and then needed the immortal body to all be reunited in new earth. And then there's the releasing of the immortal body. I do sense, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I do sense we can release an immortal body immediately for those who are spirit beings in eternity, and they go immediately to an immortal body. So I've never really thought about the concept of people actually having real bodies but being aborted, but that's still a body, isn't it? Even if it's aborted, it's still a body. Or a miscarriage, it's a body the moment it's conceived. So it probably doesn't matter what happens to it on the journey, because it's still a body, and then their blueprint then is finished when they return to heaven, and then they fulfill it through that and us with who are alive.
And Jen, I think when that white flash of light happens at conception, that's the point at which a body has been.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing very clearly these days, once we begin resurrecting, that anybody that dies short of their full blueprint right now immediately gets accelerated into full blueprint.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
That's
good too.
Yeah, so they're not taken out of the picture. They're actually put into the picture fully when they die. So right now it's win-win. You either choose to not die and move into your full blueprint, or if you've made a covenant with death and you do die, then you instantly win at that point too. And they're all wins for the big picture, because we're all involved with the big picture, either one way or the other.
So sorry. Can I just quickly ask following on what Bill was saying, because I've got a question on that. I'm not sure I fully understand, and I see two levels. Because isn't there a dimension that we're working with unfulfilled scrolls as well?
Yes.
And are you saying, Bill, that people you say immediately have completed their scroll?
No, I'm not. I think I haven't spoken myself clearly. Let me articulate better if I may. The person that has made a covenant with death and does not step into immortality does not complete their blueprint. But we know that the men in white linen are getting their bodies, or have begun to get their bodies, and they are helping us to fulfill our blueprints. So in a sense, they lose in a sense that they have not completed their blueprint, but in a sense, as far as the team is concerned, they immediately become part of the team that is working towards the big blueprint.
Well, another thought's just come to me, that there's maybe the stages of this, which is linked with the first and second resurrection, that those that have said yes to getting their immortal bodies, say they may have died without a body, then they were in heaven, and then they said yes to getting an immortal body so they could come to new earth. But then the question, do they have an immortal body at that point? I don't know the answer to that. But if they don't, then they come through us, and then they enter new earth. Maybe at that point they are completely at the end of their scroll, fulfilled. But there's still a journey for some, and then they come through us, and then they enter new earth. Maybe at that point they are completely at the end of their scroll, fulfilled. But there's still a journey for some, and then they enter new earth. Maybe at that point they are completely fulfilled. But there's still a journey for some, and then they enter new earth. according to when they make that decision and according to the living people who facilitate that. So there's a mixture of, so we've got a mixture of old earth and new, old heaven and new heaven going on. On the Earth's timeline until everything is reunited. I don't know, I'm not sure about that. That's just a new thing that's come to me.
Yeah, I don't see all the details, but I just have a sense that those that die at this point are going to be part of the big picture in some way for the Ecclesia, and that it's all just victory at this point. Even when the last enemy did cause them to die, there's very little victory in that at this point for death.
Well, there's definitely victory in the sense that anybody who dies sees the full blueprint, I see. And they see everything that is always meant to be intended. And that's magnificent. And I think that's why they have such a role to play, because they see everything. And so working with us accelerates us to the final blueprint and stops us getting sidetracked into a smaller blueprint.
I have a question. My question is, can you clarify the difference between first resurrection and second resurrection?
Oh, really good question, Patience. I'm not sure we're quite at that level of clarity yet, because I think we're on this journey of really understanding the two. I don't think I've ever articulated it myself.
I like that question.
Has anyone?
Yeah.
Oof. Anyone can say anything?
I see the first resurrection as, of course, biblically based, but it is those that are doing the overcoming. And because they're doing the overcoming, they're called to be part of the government. And the government is what's established for the 1,000 years. Now, I see that as a time. I don't really look at it as old earth or new earth. I suspect it's probably a transition time. There's some of new earth and there's some of old earth. But the first resurrection is the first fruits. And there's the teaching that we all hear all the time about the wheat and the tares. Well, we're not tares, obviously. But actually, if you're an overcomer, you're not wheat either, because wheat is not harvested until late in the season. We're barley. Barley is the first harvest. So we're barley overcomers. Father is an agricultural person. He laid out the feasts in an agricultural calendar. So the first harvest during the spring is barley. And barley is very, very simple to harvest, especially compared to wheat. Barley, when they take the first cut to see if it's ripe, it's winnowed. They just shake it, and the grain falls off on the threshing floor. There's no difficulty with it at all. Then it's just gathered. When it comes to wheat, wheat has to be basically beaten. And the tool that's used is called a tribule. It comes from the word tribulation, which is a Latin Roman word. And that's how that's harvested. And it's harvested in the fall. And it's harvested before the grapes. So the first harvest, being the overcomers, are the ones called to be the priests, the overcomers, the people of the inner court, the people closest to the Lord, the ones that have responded to Father. And that's my understanding of it. Also, the ones that have responded to the first call. And
So are you
Go ahead.
talking about living people and what they do right now?
living people right now, there are overcomers that are part of the men in white linen that have gone before us. There are, I don't know if they all are, but certainly some of them have been overcomers in their time, from their time. Paul talked about it. Paul talked about running the great race, finishing the race. He wasn't talking about his salvation. He had that locked up. He was talking about finishing it in a great way, to become an overcomer.
I don't know. I just keep going back to this passage in Revelation 20 where it says, this is the first resurrection. And it says, then I saw thrones, and the people sitting on them had been given the authority to judge. And so these I saw those people sitting on them had been given authority to judge. So these were people in heaven who died, and I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their testimony about Jesus. They had not worshipped the beast. They all came to life again, and they reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. This is the first resurrection.
Yes, and then it goes on to talk about those living. The dead in Christ rise first in the first resurrection. And then the living, those are the first resurrection that are living, join them.
I think, too, there's going to be that in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, for those who haven't died. And I think that we can be heading towards immortality or into immortality and not have to die to be part of the first resurrection. We just get in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, we shall be changed. That is the first resurrection. You're either dead and raised as part of that first resurrection, or you are living and changed and be part of that first resurrection. And
Yes.
I don't think that's far away, because we have been raising the dead recently. We've been doing this. We've been giving the dead their bodies. And I think it's all one big package. There's a season of resurrection here that we've entered into.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
I agree.
And I probably would tie it with first fruits and barley, which Thomas is mentioning. I think that may all go very much all together. I wouldn't be surprised if the harvesters of the harvesters are the barley and the harvest is the wheat.
Yes, I agree with that too.
Since we're talking about a Jewish feast, three major feasts is Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacle. And those are all fulfilled in Jesus Christ. But if you notice, we're in the time in between the trumpet, Feast of Trumpet, and the Tabernacle. We're actually going right through the Day of Atonement. So the ones who are going to join this first resurrection, who doesn't die, are the ones who's going through the Day of Atonement is being fulfilled in us, in our soul, completely. The memory of anything that is in our body completely be blotted out. So that our body, as the way it's immortal, can actually live into that 1,000 years. It's not for every Christians who are alive who will enter into that 1,000 years. It's rather those who are going to go through not only the Passover, Pentecost, but also the Day of Atonement, in order for us to go through the Tabernacle. Because there are Christians in many different stages. Some have only experienced the Passover. Some have only up to the Pentecost. we might have experienced the Pentecost, but not actually necessarily causing ourselves to go through the complete our soul becoming just like the soul of Jesus. The difference between us and Jesus is what's in our soul. There was no sin in him. And we don't want anything to do with sin, but there are hidden areas. We still carry some things that has been embedded in our body parts, and the memory of it need to be blotted out by his grace. But going into the heavenly realms is one of the reasons we need to be continually be in that place. But we will also have a spiritual heavenly body. That's a different thing. Does it make any sense? We are going to have a physical body which is immortal, or if we die for some reason by accident or something, we will have this resurrected physical body, but we will also have a spiritual heavenly body. I've seen it in heavenly places. There is a spiritual heavenly bodies apart from what I have right now.
Yes, and I'd like to comment on the Day of Atonement you were talking about as well. The Day of Atonement was supposed to be a day of Jubilee. When it first occurred, it was supposed to be a day of Jubilee. It was the day that the Israelites, having been set free, experienced Passover. They were supposed to experience Pentecost. And they were given the choice. And it turned into a Day of Atonement because they refused to have direct communications with Father. They were afraid of his thunder and his lightning and all of the sounds. They asked Moses to be their intermediary because they were afraid. They didn't believe they could handle it, except Joshua and Caleb. They agreed. The other thing I want to point out here is that the promised land is not so much land as it is a resurrection body. That's the promise.
Another thing interesting, like this is just a thought that comes to us, like our body, it's earthly body we're talking about here. Earthly body goes through baptism of water, baptism of like Holy Spirit, and baptism of fire, which is we need to go through right now. And if you notice, earth is going through water, air, and fire. It's like 4 major elements of the, earth environment, right? And
I see there's a lot of intricacy to this, and I see that there's a lot that needs to happen that's manifold in terms of this. And it's not that we don't need to know all the detail about it, but what's standing out to me is the responsibility that we have here, and the need for us to respond to this responsibility. And I'm thinking that heaven will help us to assume the position to make happen what needs to happen. And I'm saying this lightly, but I even think that acceleration that Jane was talking about is a part of that, because again, it's a lot that needs to happen, and I don't know if I see us taking the time to find out every little thing that's going to happen. Not that it's not important, but, and I think we will know the detail of some of it, but I don't know. That's just what I'm seeing. And I think as kings, I just see it as our duty to seek this, just seek out what we need to do in this case.
Yeah.
Again, because they're people who, and who's not to say they're creatures, and who knows what else planet's waiting on us.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, Simone, because that's exactly what I felt to say. Because we can get so confused with thinking of all these different scenarios. In the end, we actually don't understand what are we being asked to do right now. And I see the big question is, do we believe that we can release bodies for people who died without their body? I mean, what do we understand about that passage in Revelation 20, verse 4? And saying this is the first resurrection. I think we've all got to come to a conclusion. What does that mean? Do we open ourselves up as gates to release bodies right now, or not? I know Lee and I, we did an encounter, and we were led to this quite strongly, and that's where I got my conviction from. That I didn't even read this passage and then think, oh, I've got to do something. It just came in an encounter, and I saw a mandate, and how this was how we would get a lot of acceleration for the harvest. But it does need others, I think, to go and ask in encounters and see if at least that first step is something we are called to, or have we misunderstood the whole process?
Jane, what I'm seeing is that from this passage, what has been my revelation is that we are already part of the first resurrection, because we have to step in the place that Jesus Christ's death and resurrection was our resurrection. You see, he calls sins that be not as though they were, because they are. So he sees us as part of the first resurrection. He has resurrected us. It's not everybody who is in the group whereby they are already in the first resurrection. It's a personal revelation you have to catch and run with it.
Oh, yeah. We've got to clarify, though. Are we talking about individually ourselves, or are we talking about the corporate ecclesia? Because that's the other thing that confuses it. Yes, we can. I think we can say individually we have gone through the first resurrection, but corporately on the Earth's timeline, the question is: has that happened for everybody, or are we working for the corporate timeline?
Jane, I think those thrones that are mentioned there in Revelation 20, verse 4, are exactly the same thrones that are mentioned in the passage in Daniel 7, having to do with Ancient of Days, the thrones that were placed out. So your initial leading here to ask us about judging in our own courtroom is right on target, because what we are actually talking about here as everlasting fathers and as ancients of days, we are sitting on those thrones doing the judging that brings resurrection.
Yeah,
and the thing that's coming after the judgment for resurrection is judgment for judgment. We're judging unto life right now. We are going to do eternal judgment as the next step after this.
Yeah, otherwise, if we said everybody's gone through the first resurrection, right now, there's no role for judgment. And it's all a question of where you see the Earth's timeline is on the book of Revelation. And I know some are saying, oh, everybody's right at the end and everything's all done and that's it. But I don't believe that. I think there's these two separate timelines, and that's what brings confusion, because people can see it for themselves, but they can't see how the Earth timeline is on a different timeline. I personally believe, and I think you said this as well, we're around Revelation 14, 15.
I forget where I said, Jane, but it's exactly this place of everlasting, city everlasting is where we are right now. This is it, right at this place. I took the word, if you take Daniel chapter 7 and look through that about the Ancient of Days and judging there, and you take the book of Revelation, you look for the word everlasting, it's only in there once, and that tells us where we are on the timeline. It'll give you the verse as to where we are right now on that timeline corporately. Now, as forerunners, we are ahead of that by quite a bit, but the Ecclesia is at a place of entering into the city everlasting. The vanguard of the Ecclesia after the forerunners is entering in right now. And we have the job of judging unto life to do that. Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Are we right now is in Revelation 24? We are sitting on a throne to judge them to life for the first resurrection. Is that what we are doing?
I think that we as forerunners are in that place. I think that the Ecclesia as a whole is entering into the city everlasting. And you'll find, I'll post this out there elsewhere, but the point is that Jane is right on target when she asks us to make sure that we know how to judge in our own courtroom, because that's the beginning foundational experience preparing us to be able to judge for resurrection or life or for eternal judgment. And so apart from the details about where we are, the actual governmental actions that we're being asked to do right now include judging in our own courtroom. And Jane, you're right on when you asked that question.
Oh, right on. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been doing it so much at the moment, just every day being called to bring massive judgments, global scenarios, not for a particular people group or just huge global scenarios, and judging to life the ecclesia for those. And interesting enough, I'd forgotten about the prophetic timeline diagram that I'm not sure if Mike Parsons wrote it. I don't know who wrote it or whether he got it from somewhere else. If you haven't seen it, we must get it to post it in this group, Bill. It's got the first one was intimacy, first block, and then the second block was removing stumbling blocks, and I think we've been doing that. And it's interesting that my mandate that I first heard years ago was removing stumbling blocks. So when I saw that on that diagram, I was like, wow, that's incredible. I think we've been in quite a few years now, we've been developing the intimacy and removing the stumbling blocks throughout the way of God's people. And then the next block was judging God's household. And that's where I'm seeing now we've moved into. We're a little bit less on the removing stumbling blocks. A lot have been removed, and the ecclesia is growing into learning to judge. And then what was the one after that, Bill? Was it was it the worldly systems will be shaken, or was it the harvest of laborers?
I think they kind of overlapped. My sense is that the thing that's interesting to me right now, well, okay, there's a world shaking, and there's also this judgment begins at the house of God that we've seen going on. The two are kind of going on together. We saw the initial shaking of the household. But the interesting thing, too, is he's talking about 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of lack, like Joseph with the 7 fat years and the 7 lean years, and that we're partway through the 7 years of plenty and the 7 lean years are coming up. That interests me. But you're right, Jane. It's this judging thing right now is the thing that's the key thing right now.
Because if you look back at Revelation, if it's the judging is before the world shaking, and then in Revelation, the fall of Babylon comes in Revelation 18. And a lot of people are saying that's the shaking of the financial systems. And then what comes that? Revelation 19 is songs of victory in heaven. Oh, is that what we were looking at the other day, Bill, with Jesus coming on the white horse?
Yes, we were discussing that, and very interesting that many of our groups have been seeing white horses and us riding on white horses. That's the army of God, Jane, with Joan of Arc at the lead with her banner.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yes, and I keep seeing myself with Joan of Arc on a horse as Jesus. I've seen this for 3 years. The first vision I ever got when I started doing Ecclesia framework was me, Joan of Arc, and Jesus on 3 horses. We were calling people over to cross over. And then I couldn't believe it when that Bill and I ended up looking again at the other day on about Revelation 19 and the rider on the white horse. And it says here, its rider was named Faithful and True, and he judges fairly and wages a righteous war. That's right. Yeah, and he wore a robe dipped in blood, and his title was the Word of God. The armies of heaven, dressed in the finest pure white linen, followed him on white horses. Yeah, you see, that's exactly the image I had. He will rule them with an iron rod. He will release the wrath of God. And on his robe was written his title, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That was it. And we were saying, was a father ultimately could call themselves a King of Kings and a Lord of Lords? And we concluded, yes, that's ultimately a father would be. We could call ourselves King of Kings as well.
Yes. This whole city to city progression we're going through is progression into his headship, governmental headship. And so we're learning the governmental acts. And a city everlasting is the place we become fathers, and it's the place where we become a head. A father's a head. And it's that point at which we begin judging as a head, always judging to life at this point. And all kinds of governmental actions opening up to us. I'm just seeing a picture of this pyramid, the New Jerusalem pyramid, and the wall. You got the 12, the foundation of 12 apostles and so on. You got Jesus as the capstone, and you got the wall being built up into Jesus. I can picture it spiraling around as we build. And what we're actually doing is by encounter, by encounter, by encounter, and the governmental actions we do as forerunners in those encounters, we are building the wall, building the wall, building the wall further and further up. And it all flows out of simply beginning a mandate to do a governmental action or to judge or whatever else it is. We don't have to have understanding of all the details. We just have to flow with the mandate to do what we're given to do at the moment. And in that, we do the building that we're meant to do. The details help us to have confidence that what we're doing is legitimate. But simple encounter gives you that confidence.
Now it's beginning to make so much sense. Thank you, Bill and Jane there. It makes so much sense.
And the further part of the picture is, too, the individual forerunners like Jane go out ahead. And Jane, you've been doing spinning, and what you've been doing is all governmental actions as a forerunner for the Ecclesia. Then our governmental benches do these governmental actions, and then the Ecclesia falls behind at a later point. What you do, Jane, allows for any of that to happen, and we honor you because none of us would be here if you hadn't been doing what you were doing as a father and a head for the years that you've been doing it. And then we each now are moving into forerunner status within our own areas of spheres of authority. Whatever bench you're on, you have spheres of authority on that bench. And you're going to have forerunner status to do governmental actions or judgments judging to life within those areas of authority that you have. So it's Jane is the forerunner of the whole thing, but each of us is a forerunner within our own little areas too, that we have personal destiny or corporate destiny as a bench on. So there's a lot of forerunning governmental actions and judgment to life to be done by all of us. There's enough, well, there's plenty for everybody to be busy doing this just about all the time at this point.
Bill?
Yeah, oh, go on.
Sorry, I asked Bill before we came on, and I'd like to ask the question again and get the answer again. I asked, like with each city of all the 12 cities that are going to become one, I asked the same thing about the thrones on each city.
Yeah, my answer to Lee was I see that it's likely going to be one throne, because it's ultimately Jesus's throne that we are sharing in full headship with him. I'm seeing that this whole progression from city to city is actually the virgin bride being made like her bridegroom, and that the final union is going to happen after we've become fully like him and gone through all 12 heavenly cities and stepped fully into his headship. At that point, I believe, from my experience, what has happened to me recently is I entered into a city called New Life, which I'm believing happens after all the lights lit up in the City of Lights. And the next day I woke up and God told me this is day one. Now my whole journey's been out of the Gospel of John and the Revelation of Jesus Christ, that John wrote both. And so what I'm seeing is, you read in the Gospel of John in chapter 2, when he came into the wedding in the Cana of Galilee, and Mary talks to him about turning the water into wine and so on. John tells us that that's the third day. So when the Father, whoever it was, Father Jesus, woke me up in the morning and said, this is day one, well, I'm aware there's going to be a day 3, so now I know I'm in John chapter 1 right now. So we end up getting finish the process of becoming a head, fully like Jesus in his headship. Now we are equal kind. He can only marry his own kind. And now we're equally his kind. And New Jerusalem tells us that it's the city coming down out of heaven as a bride prepared for her husband. So this whole city to city process is the bride being prepared for her husband into headship. And then so in chapter 1 of John, there's a let there be lights thing, which we've done in already. And then in chapter 2, there's this day 3. And I have a suspicion there is no day 2, just like there was no second heaven. There was a first heaven and a third heaven. We all looked for a second heaven and there wasn't one. I have a suspicion it's day 1 and day 3. So we finish day 1, whatever that is, and then we go to the wedding. And at that point is the marriage supper of the Lamb, is what I'm believing at this point. We're not that far from it for forerunners. I'm really quite excited about that. I'm also excited about the lights going on in the City of Lights and manifestation at that point. And the first miracle that Jesus did was in the wedding at Cana of Galilee, and it tells us that he revealed his glory when he did that miracle. And I think that our completed glory, which is his glory that he's given to us, is going to be revealed as manifest sons at the wedding. So that's the rest of where I am right now, as far as I understand it. All of it with a question mark after it, needing to be verified by encounter.
I can't quite get my head around all that, but what I'm concerned is that everyone in this group is happy and has gone through a process of, first of all, becoming a judge in your own courtroom. It started for me judging over familiar spirits, And then I began to get the confidence to see that if the Father can judge and I can do what the Father does, I can judge. And then I started judging over some small familiar spirits, and I grew in confidence. I saw the encounters really clearly, and then I was casting the spirits into the fiery lake, and then I dealt with higher and higher principalities, and then I got really to know my authority. So has everyone in this group been through that kind of personal encounter?
I experienced something like that. The military tribunal that I am a part of, some things happened in the family and people around us, and that was my experience. I reviewed everything that was going on. I reviewed the material, and as a tribunal does, then I passed a sentence on the situation and bound up and did away with the cause of the problem, which was angelic. And when I was reviewing it with the Lord, it felt like it was one of the earlier experiences I've had with being on a tribunal, because that's fairly recent for me. I didn't know anything about it a couple months ago. And so I felt it was right in line with what I'm supposed to do. Yes.
So is there anybody who's sort of struggling with the concept or wants more explanation of why we should do that? Be a judge in our own courtroom? Because if we're all okay with that, that's a good foundation. We can then move forward. To more.
Can I ask a question? Judging in our own courtroom, you said it's below eternity. So is that different to the Ancient of Days?
Yes,
Where we first had this encounter for the big picture group, the first time, I don't know if people remember, we were in the Ancient of Days. I don't know if you remember that. And we weren't actually sitting, well, I remember I wasn't sitting on a throne. I was kneeling down over that pool of water that was actually the portal crying. And then we released fire and jumped through that portal. That was the first time first encounter we did on the big picture group. And we were actually at that with the Ancient of Days in that
so we've got to remember again, we've got this individual journey and we've got a group journey that we might do on encounters. So we might end up doing stuff in encounters that represents the mandate of the group, but it might not be where we're at individually. So we have to keep weighing that up and remembering it can get very confusing. But what I see is you start off in judging in your own courtroom, which is below eternity, which is part of the sort of the courts, and it's only when you really begin to operate and reside in eternity personally. Then my journey was that I was then moved into the Ancient of Days and given a coronation personally, never in a group encounter. So I knew then that I had authority to operate in that particular place personally. So now I operate from the Ancient of Days court, but that is only a recent thing. I mean, that is quite advanced to get to that point, because you have to really understand about all the elements of operating in eternity and really growing in your governmental your confidence in your governmental authority. But you could end up doing something as a group in a
And what's the difference between those two and the Court of Judges.
Yeah, look, I'm not clear what the Court of Judges is. I've been asking that, but I think because there are so few that have actually become full judges that would be in the Court of Judges that I don't know. I don't even know if I've ever been invited there, if I'm allowed to go there. I don't know. All I know is for me personally, this ties in really with what I've been doing, ties in so much with the scripture of the Ancient of Days in Daniel, that's where I'm at. Because I think those three top courts, the Court of Judges, the Court of Fathers, and the Court of the Lord, we're still not clear where they are. And I think they're probably extremely high courts that most have not reached. And maybe some are saying that they do this, but there can be different levels as well, according to what size of mandate you're dealing with. And that's the other confusion, is that there are some who would say just dealing with a nation. And so there can be all these courts dealing at lower levels. And then there's ones that deal with the whole ecclesia. You have to bear that in mind as well.
Jane,
place.
I'm also judging in Ancient of Days individually. And to answer Lee's question, the function of it is the same. I'm just pounding my gavel down and passing sentence to life, but the level of authority is different. But the function for me feels just the same as judging in my own court. You're a judge, you're a judge. But also something else. I have a sense that a lot of those courts that you've mentioned by name, Jane, as we've been going up through thrones and exercising kingly authority, I believe we actually are exercising authority at a kingly level as an Ancient of Days that's equal to the authority as a judge, judging as an Ancient of Days, as we would have been if we had gone up quite far up through the court system, which we didn't. We chose to go up to the kingly side, to the thrones. It's equivalent authority, but we're exercising it individually in many cases as an Ancient of Days.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm just asking because the last couple of days, the Ancient of Days has been highlighted to me by the Lord. So,
well, if you feel that hunger, that's when this time is. You can go and ask about it.
Okay.
And that's how it happened to me. Was I'd got confidence in the other realms in eternity. And I knew one of the realms then was Ancient of Days, and I was like, what is this about? I really, really want to go there. And I set my heart and my desire. I can't say I was, led into it in an encounter that I didn't want or was unexpected. I just set my heart on it. I was like, I really, really want to understand. And I just went in there and said, okay, what happens here? And it was amazing. I mean, I immediately got this most dramatic encounter I can still remember now. And I then got great confidence that it was okay that I was there. I mean, maybe if you go there and nothing happens, maybe that shows that you're not quite ready for it. It might happen that way.
The other thing, too, that's the key for me in judging as an Ancient of Days is that we're judging out of headship. And for me, all I need to do is find a place that I have confidence that I can be united in headship in that place. For example, I can be united in headship with Abraham and then judge to life areas that have to do with things that Father Abraham are in his line. Or, that was the big one for me. Another example was a national one, a United States national one, where I found myself able to find unity of headship with Abraham Lincoln. His name is Abraham. And he's a father. There's two fathers in American history. There's the father of the nation is George Washington, and there's Abraham Lincoln, the second father of the nation. And so I was able to be in union with him. I actually had Abraham Lincoln on the bench of three with me for this judgment, and George Washington on the other side on the bench of three with me to pass judgment and to bring unity out of headship. So if you can find a place of headship that you have confidence that you have authority to be united in that headship, then you can judge to life from that headship. That's been my experience.
Wow, November 2017, I saw in my ascension, Ancient of Days, and the few remnant that God really like raised them to be mature, to become completely one with Him, completely like as a one being of Ancient of Days. And now I hear all this about sitting on the throne of Ancient of Days and judging. It's quite exciting.
But I think the stage for most to go through, once you're confident judging in your own courtroom, is asking then about residing in eternity and operating, what that process is, and what operating on the bench of three or four, the window, with Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So if you haven't gone through any process of asking about what you need to do for residing in eternity and the whole self-government issue, I would say that's the next stage to begin asking about. Because we can visit all these different places in eternity, but it's a different question of actually saying, well, this now is my home.
And I'm now seeing for the first time, Jane, from your description, that we can actually corporately enter into these places too, as part of a corporate encounter. But we may not individually have entered or individually be functioning there yet.
And I think this is what I want to really emphasize, is that don't get too consumed with corporate encounters if it's at the expense of personal encounters and that's your only experience. It's got to be matched with personal journey, doing lots of mandates daily. It should only take a few minutes. There should be things that you can do while you're doing other jobs. That's the kind of way we've got to get to operate, that we govern and rule wherever we are, wherever we're walking around, and you're just hearing a mandate and you're dealing with it quickly. If that's overwhelming, it may be you need to pull back a little bit on the corporate encounters and give yourself space to grow your individual journey, so you get clear where you're operating from. Is it New Jerusalem? Are you descending as the New Jerusalem? Yeah, I mean, it's perfectly okay if you're only at that stage. That's very very advanced, and for many, the transition to going from just normal courts to New Jerusalem is huge, and many can't make that transition. So don't worry about things like Ancient of Days yet. That's really, really down the track. We've got to get comfortable being the descending New Jerusalem. Then when you're descending New Jerusalem, then you start to see yourself above the earth, dealing with corporate mandates for the whole ecclesia. And when you're in, that's your heart. You can't do anything smaller than that, because you care so much about the whole world. You know then that you're on the journey, you're ready to begin to ask about eternity and residing in eternity. But if you're not at that first stage, just get comfortable being the descending New Jerusalem, governing over your mandates, and wait for them to grow, and you to grow in that authority. And you really want the whole, you want to care for the whole world. So is that clear for everyone for the journey? Is that clear?
For the first time, Jane, I understand the difference between individual journey and corporate journey.
Yes, because it's so easily, it's very muddy because we're taking people through quite advanced encounters, like what we're doing on the Wednesday Zoom. You know, a lot of you are coping really well with New Earth, but you may not have understood, because we're accelerating at such a pace, you may not have understood the journey, in which case it's hard to father others in that journey. So I find it's always a question of, I was accelerated in corporately in something, and then I had to go back down the mountain personally, and also to father others. I had to understand each of the stages, and in my mind I had to like put them in progression of so I understood the difference between the age of peace and then the age of new beginnings and then the age of Zion. I had to get that really clear in my head so I could help people understand the progression, because sometimes if you do it too quickly and you're suddenly in eternity a lot and you don't understand below that, you can't father somebody into that. And you can see, I'm trying to get hold of somebody who's struggling to grasp and accept New Jerusalem, to say, what is it about New Jerusalem that they can't grasp? But I think in what I sense, no one's ever said it to me, but what I sense is that it's all a question of the timeline. If you can't grasp being out of the timeline, you'll struggle saying, why is there an age of new beginnings? Well, how come I could possibly go into Revelation 21, 22? You know, isn't that in the future? And therefore they want to just go back to the courts just to do what the problems of the world are right now, because that's what they can grasp. But the moment you can get your head around being out of the timeline and the individual and the corporate, it starts to fall into place a bit easier. It was very tricky for me because I had people coming from me from all different angles. Some who were saying that it's all completed, others saying no, others saying, oh, we only deal with the world problems. And I had to get this kind of middle path, which I now feel reasonably clear on. So I just want to make sure that, yeah, everyone's doing an individual journey.
Jane, the other thing too is that for me, the absolute best thing that ever happened to me was Tree of Life group and facilitating it, because I had to go down to the very beginning and facilitate other people into it and fill in all my own gaps and actually make all this stuff that in many cases was theoretical into actual encounter experience for myself. And so one of the best things you can possibly do is facilitate others in their journey at lower levels, because it gets you that full understanding of that level and makes it very real to you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Jane.
Mm.
Hi, this is Anushka.
Oh, hi.
I had a question about the courts, if I may.
Yes, do.
So I think it was this month in March, or probably end of last month, where I had it was a mandate for me to be part of the Court of 70. So am I supposed to stop going there, or do I continue going there on my journey, or how does that fit in?
Yeah, it was.
And also with the Galactic Council, or do we stop going once once all of the blueprints are completed?
Well, it was interesting in my journey. I was led to the Court of 70 quite early on. First of all, I did lots of cases to them. and then I actually saw an invitation to be part of it, and then it began to fade away. I wasn't drawn to go there as I began to explore the higher ages, and the age of peace and rest, and then the age of new beginnings. So I would just say it's where you're led to go and where your spirit really wants to go. I think as you begin to get other ages clear in your understanding, you'll probably find that you want to explore those more. But as for the Galactic Council, I think there's a lot of I wouldn't say it's, in fact, I've hardly heard anyone say they've had encounters there, and I think it may be a bit too advanced for all of us at this stage. I did make some attempts to go and observe, but I wasn't confident in what I was seeing, although we did have one encounter as a group where we did see this big council. But I think it's very big picture, the Galactic Council, so there's very few talking about it. It's probably too. My sense is, if we go there and try and absorb the big picture before doing some of the groundwork, we will miss the essence of what we need to know that's more important for ourselves on our individual journey. So I see things like judging in your own courtroom is a really critical stage in the development of a son.
Mm-hmm. Well, what happened with me was, on my journey, I had already passed through the age of peace and rest, and then I was introduced to the court of 70, where they asked me to take my seat there. But then I had an encounter with Enoch, and that encounter was about new beginnings, and that automatically took me to new beginnings. And I sort of, I'm not consciously going to the court of 70. I don't know if my spirit is doing it in the night watch. I'm not sure. But one of the mandates was to also go to it was like a legislative assembly or something for the Federation of the Earth. So I thought that was the Galactic Council. But I never engaged it on my own yet, even though I had the mandate to do that.
Well, that's really interesting to see how much acceleration you've been led into. Yeah, and that's just wonderful. I mean, I would just go with where you're led. And have you been led to be the descending New Jerusalem yet?
Yes, I'm already at the city everlasting. What happened was I was talking to Bill, and that's also my name, my first name. It means everlasting love. And so he told me, he was like, and my other name, which is Avahel, and that's source of life. And the beginning and the end of my name is life. But the middle part I've still not quite figured out, because it's a Hebrew name. But I saw it written on my throne on an encounter. And what happened was, so that's how I came to know my name. But as I was progressing, but what happened was, I seen myself with the procession, and I seen myself. But when I went to Everlasting City, when I entered over there, I took a tour. I said, I'll just, move around the place. But when I went to the throne, I saw myself already sitting there. I seen my mantle, I seen everything. And I seen my mantles all through, the colors of them, from New Jerusalem to City of Zion, to this, to Mount Zion, to everything, in their succession. So I've seen it. So I'm not quite sure. And then I seen myself as light. And then I had this revelation that I'm already crowned in City of Light also. But I haven't consciously gone there. But somehow my spirit has.
Wow, what a flow.
I don't know. Yeah, the only problem is that I'm not conscious of it. And I see my spirit, even when I'm doing stuff through the day, all of a sudden I see my spirit in different realms, in different ages, in different worlds. I see benches of 3 with angels, but they are in completely different realms. But I'm not even engaging Metatron's queue because I'm just doing some other work or something in the house. So I'm not quite sure. Or I see myself in some futuristic age with different stuff and the different vehicles and stuff like that. So yeah, so I'm sometimes I'm a bit confused as to what I'm seeing, and I don't know where I am, but it's just like I'm there all of a sudden.
Yes, and I think what for the rest of you, what Anushka was saying to me personally was that she thinks the forerunners now have created this pathway such that the next generation can accelerate really quickly. So I think we have to be open to the fact that there will be a generation coming through will have massive acceleration, and to be okay with that. And also, but I do want to ask you, Anushka, how about judging? Have you done any judging?
In the court of ceremony?
No, just on your own, judging the Ecclesia to life for various mandates.
Yes, that started. Actually, what happened was because it all happened really quick, and I didn't really expect an acceleration because I was a lord, and then I came to know my mountains from there's an angel who was sitting there on my seat, on my lord throne, and he told me his name, and then he told me he gave me the names of my mountains, my spheres, my personal spheres. But then just within a few weeks, Jesus came and he told me my kingly mountains. And the kingly mountains were like time, and they had unusual names. And I saw my region, and he showed me a vision, and it was the world. But I saw my spirit take the earth and put it in my heart. The earth was like the size of a coin, or like a lime, very small. And I saw myself. I didn't consciously do it, but I could see my spirit doing it, putting the earth in my heart. But thereafter, so I hardly even got to rule over my personal mountains. But I had an understanding of how to do it. I knew exactly how to do it. So I didn't have confusion with what was given to me, with concerns, mandates and stuff. I had an understanding and I could just flow with it. But and then after that came the kingly mountains. But once he told me that, they were all to do with the world and the ecclesia as a whole. Wow. And I started doing that, and it was natural for me. But I never did anything with a region or a country or a nation. But I don't know. It just came naturally.
Wow. Wow, that is just an amazing story.
But I understood the ages as well, because I could feel a progression in my spirit, and I knew where I was, because I could see it. Somehow it was, even with the familiar spirits and everything else, there came a change. The higher I went, I would not even do anything. I would just be me. I would just rest. And somehow it would flow into my spheres. And all that, whatever struggle I had, it just stopped. And I stopped even going to the mobile court. I just stopped everything. And there was an ease and a rest, and I could feel that power flowing down from me. Even though I wondered where my mountains disappeared. I didn't even know. I was wondering because I was in Mount Zion, and I was wondering where my mountains disappeared to. And then Bill told me they all became one. And then I realized that there was an acceleration. And before I knew it, when he was asking me about my coronations, I came to know from him that I was already a chancellor, because it was happening so fast, and the coronations were happening so fast. So I guess along with that, because I did have an understanding of the ages, and even with infinity and creating a city there and doing stuff, I had an understanding, or my spirit had an understanding. But I wasn't clear about the 12 cities, which were first. So Bill kind of helped me with that. But the strange thing was, it was like I had already been to New Jerusalem before. I'd been to New Jerusalem in 2015 somehow. And I seen that place, and I told people about that place. And initially they were excited, and it didn't even dawn on me that that was New Jerusalem. So somehow, and I just kind of started listening to people who were mystics. I hadn't even become a mystic, and I didn't even engage stuff like the dark cloud. I saw the dark cloud over my head, so it was like the dark cloud engaged me. So things started happening pretty fast, and he started showing me stuff pretty fast and how to transform matter and stuff like that. So, but it all came from a place of intimacy. I didn't even want to see the realms, even though I had the chance to do that. I would just go and just want to be with him, and that was all. And it just went on and on and on like that. And then he told me, this is the Father. I had encounters with the Holy Spirit, with Jesus, and then he told me, and so everything came out of of intimacy. Like I would go to just be with him, and he would take me and show me something, as like a like a reward, you could say. And so what happened was that there came a point where the Father told me to come to step into his heart every day. And when I did that, what started happening was I saw the 8, the infinity symbol, and I began to wonder what that was. I mean, I knew that was covenant. I also knew that was infinity. And I heard Mike saying, you can walk back. And so that if I saw in his heart, because he holds everything in his heart, and all the realms are in his heart. And I seen the light chamber also in his heart. And I used to go there continually because he told me to go in his heart. So I still do it. Go around his heart. And actually what I was doing was encountering different realms in his heart.
Wow. Wow, thank you for sharing that. I think that's just such great confirmation to see how someone can be accelerated. It's incredible. I mean, I know most of us sort of say our mountains have merged, but can you define, you mentioned one around time. Can you mention any others that are really in your heart?
Well, I got the world. I don't know. I mean, that's what I saw, the entire globe. But that was different when I started going to eternity, and I started sitting on the bench. What happened was they were more bigger in picture. Like he would give me a mandate to release something or to pause something down, which would go through the ages. But later on, I had this experience on that bench where I was no longer conscious of the Godhead per se. I mean, I knew he was there, but before he used to give me a mandate while sitting on the bench and tell me what to do or what to release. And then I saw a higher version, like, because once he said, what do we release to the universe? And so he started opening up my understanding. Or I would, I wouldn't know really, because I was still growing, but he would lead me to something, and he would, kind of help me understand some stuff. And then later on, there was a day, and that was just like 2-3 days maybe. When I went on the 3rd, 4th day, it was different. Like normally I hear God in my mind, like thoughts, like when he would speak to me. But that time when I had gone on the 3rd, 4th day, it was different. I wasn't getting thoughts in my head which were not mine. Like he would tell me what to release, but he just stopped doing that. And I felt like we were one. And a thought came to my head, but that was my thought. But it was also his. But it was not like it was coming from outside. And then whatever I thought was what he thought. I'm not quite sure how to explain this. And there was a union that I never experienced before, and that was just awesome. And that's what I want to experience more.
Wow. Well, you could be fathering us in a few months' time, so. Get ready.
testimony. Beautiful testimony.
Yeah, thank you
Yes.
for that.
Thank you for
Welcome,
sharing.
and for all of us, this is testimony that we can walk through as a door. If you're like me, you've been hearing a testimony and your heart's been saying, I want that, I want that, I want that. And go through that as a door into it. It's available to all of us.
And we
Yeah.
honor Anushka.
Mm.
When she was talking, I saw all of us, we were all just so joyful. And I've had so much joy flooding in me the whole time she's been speaking. And I saw us around her and we were just clapping and cheering and just so delighted. And it's very funny that one of her names is Everlasting Love, like Simone, and that just made me laugh even more.
Double, right? We got
Yeah,
double.
I saw the multiplication, and it's like I was hearing "Get ready." It's multiplication time.
Wow.
And I have a sense that this is just God showing us this is what we have been asking for. All the multiplication we have been seeing and the releasing we have been doing, this is it, and much more to come. So it's like Paul, Bill was saying, the harvest of the harvesters. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Yes, we are in it. This is part of what God is going to do through all that we have been doing.
Woo.
Very encouraging.
Oh.
It's a blessing to hear from Anushka.
Yes, and welcome.
Yes, welcome
Thank
to the
you.
Welcome, and we take this opportunity to call forth many more who will come in this acceleration rate. Yes, we call you forth. Come.
Yes.
We welcome you. This is what we've been waiting for anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
This is manifestation of the encounter that's coming to me is you remember when we were seeing sons of God being manufactured at a fast rate, and that there's literally a technology. Remember the wheel that was like on a steamboat that was manufacturing the sons of God. You remember that? Anybody remember that? That's what this to me this is a manifestation of that encounter.
I remember it, Simone.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Woo.
Wow.
When we were the arrow the other week, the arrow going through the bullseye. And remember, we were getting words about the full quiver regarding the sons.
Yes.
And calling
Wow.
forth the sons.
I also like that she's been able to give us independent confirmation of things that we have experienced,
Yes.
but we're not aware that it was also being experienced outside of this house, which just gives us that much more confidence that this is a universal experience.
It does. I've been calling forth other people that would, confirm these experiences. So that's, it's just wonderful. We should probably close the recording shortly. Any final comments before we stop the recording? Oh, just one thing I got a bit of revelation the other day talking about judging and why I see the judging is such a critical part of the journey to bring the whole ecclesia into its final destiny. Was the throne, the great white throne in Revelation 20, and where the final judgment happens. And I suddenly got revelation that once we begin to judge on a large scale, major things, our final destiny will be to sit on the great white throne with the Father judging the whole thing. And wow, that just blew me away. that's kind of the journey. And so I think this is why judging is so important, that we can get our heads around the Father judging to life and not judging vindictively, and that it's a very positive thing, but it is the destiny of the Ecclesia is the final judgment. Oh yeah, and also the dead were judged according to what they had done. So again, we can't say, as some are saying, that it doesn't matter what we do. What we do in terms of these final acts in latter days, that they matter. Okay, shall we turn the recording off?
Can I ask you a quick question about that, Jane? Then whenever it's highlighted to you an issue concerning the Ecclesia, you judge it to life immediately right then. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and can it be also I can just get it. I don't often just hear it, directly. I just often get it by engaging in something, and then suddenly I know that's a mandate. I can't even think of any illustrations now, but I get them regularly of major. I mean, I think it's come from spending a long time in the courts as well. You really get to see the accusations and how things work, and then it quickly comes to you. You can see, like, a lot. I mean, a lot of it is trading. Really, it's wrong trading.
Yeah, I'm noticing that we felt led to judge to life the Ecclesia concerning technology too. That came up. It came. So that was interesting.
In what sense?
Well, judging the Ecclesia to life for not being gates in the past for the technology that God wanted to come through, the Ecclesia, but instead God having to go to, the secular realm to get it into the earth. And, just not being in position to receive from heaven technology as it was coming down from heaven.
Wow, I never saw that. That is amazing.
And even being a hindrance to it and thinking that it wasn't good at times. So it's just kind of not in alignment with heaven concerning that. So it came up before that technology encounter, and I know it was God because it wasn't on my radar before. I mean, it just kind of came, and I was like, oh, okay. So I did that. I felt a difference in my spirit. And even though I was doing it for the Ecclesia, which included me. So I was just noting that. I think that's an example of what you're saying right here.
Yeah. Yes, that is really good. So you're actually saying that if we don't stand as a gate to release spiritual technologies, then physical technologies can come into the earth that may not necessarily have needed to be there if we'd had the spiritual technology.
Yeah, and I think it was one of the ladies, I don't remember who, I think it might have been Lee, brought up so that they won't be misused. Because, technology is, just like a just like money or anything, it could be used the right way or it could be used the wrong way. And, you know, it's best if it comes through our hands, so to be, well, not necessarily, I mean, you know, it's best that it comes through our hands so to be used properly like God intended it to be.
Well, I'm seeing it even more than that, because this is something I'm just getting some revelation on, is how much, it is the question of how much do we call in forth natural in technologies and improvements, but that they may then become trading floors to stop us turning to God and dealing with it spiritually. And I suddenly got this whole revelation around, what am I doing calling forth all these physical health, you know, technologies that might actually lead us to stop craving immortality.
Okay.
And so what I'm seeing from what you're saying is that you could argue that a lot of physical technologies are really not that good. They could be the second best, even though there's goodness in them. But they may be the second best blueprint because of man's refusal to keep choosing Christ as its sufficiency. And, you know, say, for example, we'd all accepted that telepathy centuries ago was the blueprint. We wouldn't be going down this track of inventing all these technologies now that are going to help us with telepathy that are coming up in the natural.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so good, because because I remember Dr. O said that technologies can represent what we should be able to do anyway in the spirit.
Yeah.
So I agree with what you're saying. Sometimes it can be a second fiddle to what God originally wanted.
It's
yeah,
about, sorry.
Go on. Yeah, go on.
Well, again, this morning when I was outside swinging my granddaughter on the swing, I found myself repenting on behalf of the Ecclesia for not being in the right position to actually see the fullest blueprint. So I then called forth that we would be positioned in the correct place to see the final blueprint. And then desiring and to be positioned. I said, Lord, I just lay down everything that I know and think I know. And the cry of my heart was, position us. I am willing to be positioned to see the fullest blueprint. And because if it's as technology ourselves, if we're releasing through us from the fullest blueprint, then that's the right blueprint. That's the right technology. I don't know if that's too simple or too big a thing to say, you know, that it needs more detail. I don't know. But I just always, you know, say, show me the end. Show me the biggest blueprint. Show me the end and let me work back from that position. So my position, you know, so show me, take me to the position where it's the end. So I can see and then work my way back from that.
I mean, that probably works if you've got an incredibly open spirit. It may be for some really hard to do that, and the journey may be a better way of operating. Because what's interesting is that I was just asking then, you know, was there one position? say, was it New Earth or? But I do sense that the whole understanding the whole journey gives that depth. So, for example, like, you know, we wouldn't, if we led someone straight to New Earth and said, don't worry about anything else, would they get the fullest blueprint? I sense not. So I do sense there's a huge value in the journey that gives us assurance as well. But I'd certainly say if any have not really sought to engage eternity, infinity as a major areas to consider that, because you may be seeing a lower blueprint if you haven't. But I'm so encouraged the fact that you're seeing this thing, Simone, around the technology, because it's been troubling me for a while that, you know, what are we doing? Are we calling forth a lot of physical things? I almost feel like when I got this revelation recently, it's going to dramatically change the way I operate, and will be a less interest in the physical things and more in the spiritual way of doing it, which can be tough because we all want some physical things to manifest, you know, something that we can see and touch, but it always causes less sufficiency on Christ. It always does. I mean, look what Moses and Abraham could do without hardly any, you know, sophisticated technology, just relationship, and what they could see and they could hear, and they, you know, the destiny they could fulfill was just amazing. And we can have the same, or we could have that temptation of something being there that makes it easier for us. So say, for example, they invented a telepathy device. We'd be so tempted to use that instead of learning how to hear from God.
Yeah, I agree, Jane. And I think to do so would be eating from, it would be eating from coming from the old wineskin. Because I think that was an issue with the old wineskin. They were so caught up with manifestations that God wasn't the focus a lot of the time. And it reminds me, I think I told you all before, you know, I just had an opportunity to talk to Ian Clayton a little week ago, and he told us he specifically shut signs and wonders down in his meeting because he does not want that to be the focus. He said he can make a lot happen, but that would not serve the body. It wouldn't serve the Ecclesia, and he didn't want people to come to a show. He said the focus, you know, ought to be God, and God ought to be the center. And so I just went. It just came to me when you were saying that, and he said something in confirmation to that.
Jane? I was wondering if I could ask a question, not on technology, but on telepathy. What do we know about that? Is it just that we communicate in our mind with God and that's it, or are we seeing something more than that, or are we experiencing something more than that?
Anybody feel led to answer that?
About telepathy?
Yes. Are we experiencing anything more than that? In the sense where not only with God but even otherwise, are we having encounters like that? Because I believe we are naturally telepathic, So are we having encounters where we've had experiences like that? Because our spirit is growing. So I was just wondering. And the reason I was, or rather, I'll share my experiences with you all. What happened was, and this started also happening about 2 years ago, where I would somehow pick up someone's thought, and the person, it happened on one instance where I just picked up someone's thought in my church, and I didn't pay attention, and I just answered what that person I thought said, but the person didn't say anything, and the person was just shocked and looking at me, and the person said, I didn't say anything. And I was like, oh, I thought you said, so the person said to me, that's what I thought, but that's not what I said. I was like, I was so stunned at that moment, and that was the first time I realized it happened. And I wasn't even paying attention, to see the person actually talking. And I just started answering what the person was thinking. And then it happened again, and then it happened again, and then it happened when I was at the airport. But I'm not engaging people, because at the airport too, I was just standing, and my mind was blank because I was just waiting for my visa. And all of a sudden, I get this string of thoughts about the luggage, and it's just like a flow of thoughts, like how anyone would think. And then I'm like, that's not me. And then I turn around and I see this man, he's standing there. I didn't even, I didn't even know he was standing there. And I look and I see he was waiting for his luggage. And I didn't even know anyone was standing because I was just lost in my own world. And I just realized he was there because I could read his mind. And I told myself, stop it. Why am I doing this? And I couldn't understand it. But I wasn't engaging them. And then it happened again somewhere else. And I guess that person freaked out. And then later that person called me again just to ask me, how did you know what I was thinking? Because it really makes them uncomfortable and it freaks them out. But I'm not like really doing it, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Oh, I don't think we've ever had that level in encounters. That is incredible. I mean,
But
we
now
get a
I
lot of,
I'm
we do
sorry.
get a lot of we've been consciously for a long time, we used to infuse our minds together. We don't do it so much now, but in the early days we did that, and I think what we can say at the moment is we just have a lot of unity, and people just share the odd word, and a lot of us get what the other people mean quite easily. So in that sense, we are picking up on each other's brain waves quite well. But I don't think we've ever experienced that kind of thing you described.
Okay. Does it happen even with like unbelievers? I mean, just people traveling.
Yeah, I have in different scenarios, and it kind of baffled me as well. Of course, the people, they looked at me like really funny. The people didn't know me. They looked at me, and of course, I didn't say anything, and I didn't answer. I did not answer. So it kind of startled me as well, and I wasn't looking for it. So. And I know Justin Abraham has a teaching out there or something on this subject. And
yes, I've seen that because I had these experiences.
Yeah, if we look in the Word, we see Jesus did the same thing with people.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
to
and
me,
I also
do it out of love. And, people are thinking thoughts that are not godly. What I thought, well, I'll just, pray life, pray life over them, pray that they will know the Lord, and things of that nature. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I've also experienced that with people generally. And you just know what they are thinking, and I don't really say it, but the way I will react, some of them realize that I have an idea what they are thinking. I try not to say anything, but I pray for them, like Dana said. Just release peace. If I see they're struggling, they are going through, I release peace and I release the love of God. It's very uncomfortable though, because you don't know what to do. Yet you happy you can help by praying quietly. And
Yeah. But are these experiences with people counseling? What I was saying was, it's what I've experienced is like, we can do it with the people we are counseling, but since we have the mind of Christ, was what I was thinking, we just naturally, somehow, when we are tuned to it, we somehow tend to know people's random thoughts, like their exact words that they're thinking in their head, even though we are not there to counsel them at all. Was what I was saying, like the person with the luggage and stuff like that, where he showed me the bigger picture, where it's not, it could help like if we are counseling people, but also on a larger scale, where we are so tuned in, where we can. And what happened was, initially I was fighting it because I was telling my mind, or I don't know what I was saying, but I was telling myself, stop it, don't do it again. But what I realized was, it's part of our God nature to have that ability and to cultivate it, was what I was thinking.
Well, I see it. It's like the fullest measure of what we used, we would refer to as the spiritual gifts, of a word of
We
knowledge,
should, yeah.
and it's working at the fullest measure of all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's no longer a gift either. It transcends. It comes because of your identity somehow.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not great at explaining this. I only got these experiences, but I may not be able to express it really well.
Well, we know through encounters that we will operate this way, on New Earth, because we are one with the Godhead. So it's that expression of what you were saying, of being so in one. Your thought is His thought, and there's no when did it become my thought and when did it end being His thought. It's all of one, and it just flows as one. And there are, signs of that is happening more and more. Just on chats, I've experienced writing the same thing, exactly the same thing, which is the same thought as Alana, and then we laugh about it.
Wow.
So it is happening. When I had my encounter with the Lord years ago, and He stepped into this physical realm, that's when I first knew there was this, that it existed, that was a way of communicating with God, because no verbal words were spoken with the Lord and myself in that encounter. It was just instant, and it was all done like thought, like the intention of your heart. That's why Jesus could look in a person's heart and know the intentions of their heart. And it was just done in that way. It was just the thoughts were there in my mind, like, it was my thought, who are you? And straight away the next thought was, and it was still my thought, it was your and that's how the conversation went, when He stepped in this natural realm. So I always knew that the fullness of a word of knowledge and the word of wisdom, etc., that was the fullest measure of being able to communicate with the Godhead in that way. And I said it to the girls the other day, when I was driving down here, I was thinking about that, and about communicating at the highest level with God. And I said, I see that I could just picture, Simone in my head, And I just know that as I have a thought, she will hear that thought instantly. You know, like it'll just be such an instant flow no matter where we all are. We'll be communicating that way.
Mm.
What I was saying was, maybe we can pursue it because maybe we don't need to go to New Earth to see the full manifestation of it. Maybe we can see the full manifestation of it here as we pursue it. And
Well, I think we
and
are. I think we are. I think we are. I think we're seeing. I think because we have gone to New Earth and are going to New Earth, and like what you said, I think we're going to a lot of places that we don't even realise we've been to.
yeah.
Yes, and what happened with me was when it started happening with me, I started knowing people's thoughts, and I talked to the Lord about it. What He told me was, this is just the beginning, because you will know as you are known. So it's a process, and it's going to be bigger than this.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, and we just have to expect all of that now, the fullness of it now, because something that Mike Parsons had said was, we no longer operate in gifts anymore, because he said that Jesus did not operate in gifts at all. He went to a higher form where he didn't operate out of any of the Holy Spirit's gifts. He just operated out of identity of him being a son. And he did the miracles, and everything he did was because of him being the Son of God in that full identity and sonship, not because he had the gift of healing or the gift of and any of the other gifts, word of wisdom and knowledge and all of the rest. But he said that he operated from a higher form just because of who he is. And I think that we are also coming to that, where we don't need to function. At a lower level, we do function with gifts, and then we don't need to function out of gifts anymore. We just function out of who we are as a son.
Absolutely. And I believe the key is like what you said, it's being one with the Godhead, it's being one with the heart of God.
Yeah.
And everything grounded on love.
Yeah.
Because judgment is the greatest love that the Father could give us. It's to being able to judge, because it releases restoration, it releases holiness. You know, it is our ultimate judging to life and freedom.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, guys. We should probably finish there. But a most awesome dialogue. Wow, I think this was a manifestation of that dream that I thought we would be going and talking at a different level than we have today, and it's been the most profound dialogue. I'm blown away. So